and listen to me well and able to see the webcam?
Yes, Mr. Krishnamurthy.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. And good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all the people around wherever you are, and staying safe during this COVID times. And nice meeting you all. So welcome to this session, which is on DevSecops. Primarily, I'm going to talk about automated security testing. How do you get into, we talk about security today, which is much more important than ever before. The kind of attacks that has happened last 4 or 5 months, being because people working remotely, the endpoint protection has been a major concern for businesses and CIOs equally. So the attacks has gone only much higher last 4 or 5 months as compared to a couple of years. So how do we really address these situations, and how we can address this much faster is one of the biggest challenges today we are speaking. And one of the things that we all may know that there is a 1-10-60 minute rule. That is, in 1 minute you need to detect any vulnerabilities, and in 10 minutes you need to identify it, and 60 minutes you need to remediate it. That's the kind of speed that people are talking about. So in this context, how do we bring all those things when we talk about DevOps, where we are only trying to see how we can make the things faster? And in the game of making things faster, we also land up, if we don't have a good code, the vulnerabilities are going to only multiply and multifold. So it's very important that how we go about it, things like that. So who went cloud recently with a $10 billion investment? Yes, Pentagon, supposed to be the most safest place and secure place when cloud. What is so significant about this? Cloud has been in one area it had a start about 10, 12 years back, and then it was never moved forward. People thought that cloud is an area where security may be compromised and things like that more easily than if you are in a on-prem kind of a solutions. But then the things are changing. As things are changing, it is also putting all of us, the software developers, service providers, product developers, to be more aware of the kind of security things that we need to bring into our systems. Another I would like to bring up a context here is, this is pretty old, but I'm sure that everybody knows about it, but it's again very important lessons to be learned. The famous Equifax attack that happened. Just 2 important takeaways from this attack is that just failing to update the Apache struts framework caused this, and it was such a small thing. Maybe when this attack happened 3-4 years back, we didn't have this technology and tools to alert. Thanks to all the tools that we have today, that we get an alert that a particular patch has not been updated and things like that. Some of the things I'm going to talk about in today's presentation quickly. And second takeaway is not the 145 million affected. Okay, that is not the takeaway. The takeaway, another important, is it took about 3 months to really realize that such an attack ever happened. So in a situation where we are so speed and things like that, we cannot afford to wait so long. So that said, quickly, what is that I'm going to cover in next 15-20 minutes? Let me tell you, this is a topic which we can keep on talking, and time is never sufficient. Very interesting subject. But then I'm going to talk about when we talk about security from an enterprise segment, what is that people are looking at it, and what are the various dimensions of security. And if you have to really go and implement it, we keep talking about it, but if I have to go and implement it, how do I really go about implementing on a stage-wise? Do I take a big bang approach, or do I take a stage-wise approach and things like that? How do I mature my DevSecops or DevOps maturity so that there is a maturity that is needed from the individual point of view, from the team's point of view, and also from the organization point of view. It is a phased approach that we need to look at it. I will talk about it. And then probably when we talk about this, what it entails when we talk about DevOps from an end-to-end, and what what are the various security aspects that we need to be aware of as far as DevOps is concerned. And then also I will talk about on the tools. What are the tools that you can use in various stages of DevOps. So that, and then once we do all these things, obviously, now we need to really measure, whether whatever we do, we implement it, whether it is measurable. Only then you can see a success. You need to set goals and things like that. So that's going to be the primary agenda of my meeting. So quickly jumping in now. So I was talking about most of the security concerns that if you talk about the enterprises. So what you see in this screen is the various parameters that is coming in front of you. I'm not going to talk about each one of these in detail. We don't have that much time. But then about 15, 16 of these, but not necessarily only these. It could be less than this or more parameters than this. But the fact is this, that the enterprises are looking at each one of these in quite detail. So when we talk about encryption of data, they are looking at how you are actually encrypting the data. So you may be actually doing various things. You may be developing a product. Then if you're developing a product, the product, how it actually manages data is something which is important. And if you are developing a software for your customers, then in that case, again, you need to look at what kind of data you are dealing with. There are a lot of PII data, that is personally identifiable information data, is something which is important, and how you actually identify or de-identify, what kind of tools you can use to de-identify those data. These are the things that is something which is important, and what kind of an encryption mechanism you bring in. So so this is something one of the important. Then comes the application security. Application security, if you look at it, again, how there are various factors. One is that you can say that one is the environment, right? The environment in which the product is being developed. Then the product itself, the application itself, how you are building a secured application. That is something which is important. So we will talk about it in a couple of slides. Then comes this monitoring and log management. Monitoring and log management, again, take the example of Equifax. So you need to constantly look for the logs. What is happening? You need to keep on listening and hearing the entire DevOps cycle, and then you need to have a log management. Today the logs are churned in millions and millions and millions. So, but then there are very good tools today where you can really look at these, logs and identify any of the things that you find very suspicious, which you need to really be alerted about and things like that. That's something which is important. Another factor is primarily data retention. So when you are dealing with data, and when you're talking about application security and things like that, data comes the biggest concern. So how long you're going to retain the data? Okay, so there will be again, these are all policies and something which is commanded by your customers, saying that you can retain the data until the end of the project, or maybe you can keep it for a couple of more months and things like that. But then once you are done with your usage of the data, it's one of the things is important is that how do you really delete this data? And then there again, you need to have a policy, and you need to have a framework as to how you would destroy data so that it does not land up into the hands of people, which would become embarrassing to everyone concerned. And then comes the solutioning and deployment, deployment and hardening. This is hardening of, again, software and hardware. Okay, all the patch management, there will be operating system hardening and things like that. That again, how do you really manage and things like that? I don't want to go again in each one of these: backup and recovery, physical security, network security. Again, is very important. Again, from the operations point of view, when you are implementing something, how you are actually having a network security. Again, do you have a network segmentation? Do you have a server for development? Do you have a secure server for your deployment? Do you have a staging environment? Somebody spoke about testing. Do you have a test server and things like that? So these kind of network security and network segmentation is something which is important. And then incidents and response management, it will come every time when we talk about security. how do you really cater to the incident and response management as you keep on going and finding the solutions. And cloud hosted solutions today, as I told you, the first example, people are moving to cloud. That opens up multiple plethora of more challenges. But then the good thing is that there are again a lot of tools available to look at various aspects of security and things like that. So we will talk about that as well. Identity and access management, again, end user, how do you take care of that? Data privacy. Vendor management, you may be wondering why vendor management has come in here as one of the critical things, because you may be subcontracting your work to a vendor, so you cannot say that, look, I'm not responsible or I'm not accountable. So it's important that when you are acquiring a software into your organization, which is going to be part of your solution to your customer, you are accountable and you are responsible to do a complete VAPT of that. I can give you one of example in my own organization. We were buying one HR related software, and then we had actually issued the purchase order, and then we realized that, okay, we have not conducted any VAPT or not asked for a vulnerability assessment report. And then we asked the vendor, and they were transparent enough to share a report which said there are two high level vulnerabilities. And then we were thinking, what do we do now? How do we go about it? And then there are a lot of discussion, deliberating, and then we finalized that, okay, these two vulnerabilities may not really impact any data, confidential data. So, but then the vendor gave a writing, says, undertaking that this will be fixed in the next forthcoming release and things. And so what I'm saying is that vendor is very, very important. They are part of our ecosystem. So by security, it means that everything is in the game together. Okay, and mobile application security similarly, and then security governance. Security governance is the mother of all this thing that you're seeing here, because governance is the model that you may want to drive right from the beginning, right from your planning stage, right from your architecting stage till you deliver any application or any product. Security governance has to be implemented. One of the best things that everybody is using and found to be very good is the OWASP model. In fact, in next year, 3-4 slides, I'll be talking about the OWASP model of how you can go about a secured and stage-wise implementation instead of a big bang approach. So we will look quickly at stage-wise implementation of DevSecops. So one of the key important aspect as far as DevOps is culture. I'm sure the other speakers today would have spoken about culture as one of the factors, and you're going to hear this rest of the day also, because culture is the most important. Without that, because it's basically you need to have different thought process and idea to get this implemented across your organization. So with that, again, if you look at it, there are various levels. So this is basically level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4. What it means here is that taking a stage-wise approach for implementing your DevOps and your DevSecops model. Instead of doing a big bang approach, which I cannot do it, can I get 100% all the tools available, security tools in the marketplace, and start implementing, and then my problems will be solved? No, it will not be. You need to take a stage-wise implementation. Everything has to be matured over a period of time so that the culture gets into it. So if you look at it culture-wise, there's education and guidance. So security consulting on request. So what happens is that you may have a security team internally, but then there is a need. So somebody is reaching out, saying that, hey, look, I have a security testing. Can you just tell me how to go about it? And kind of, which means that there is a higher level of awareness within the organization. So you are at a level 1, and then at level 2, you may be having each team has a security champion. So which means that you are building within the team the security practices and things like that. Level 3 could be like conduction of build it, break it, fix it kind of a context within it, and many of the organizations do that. And then level 4 is aligning security in teams, and then conduction of war games or conduction of collaborative team security checks. So you can take this from level 1, level 2, level 3 to level 4 as far as education and guidance and things like that. And when you go at the level 4, you are matured where you gamify the entire thing. And I have seen some of the gamification when you do security. what happens is that everybody gets, security becomes everybody's responsibility. If you don't do that, then what happens, there is a security team within your organization who is responsible, squarely responsible for everything. So if I'm a developer, I'm responsible for security. If I'm an IT person, I'm responsible. If I'm an ops person, I'm equally responsible. But the depth of my security capability may vary. As a security person, definitely my knowledge and experience of handling security may be very high. But the point here is that everybody is equally responsible as far as security is concerned. And then on the information security, targets are communicated. So you say that, okay, these are the targets we need to achieve, and go on from creation of simple abuse stories. You build those stories to say that, again, bringing that education and culture within the organization. And you go finally to the level 4, where you conduction of advanced threat modeling. Okay, so there are various threat modeling, that you can look at it. One is the OWASP threat model, which you can, look at it, or you can also look at Microsoft threat model tool. It's called as TMT, which is again, it's very, very popular. You can look at it, works very beautifully with your Azure and things like that. So where you have the key vault kind of tools, which you can use to build your threat model there. So when you get at level 4, you are already talking about like how I can build systems that are actually secured, and that's the way forward looking at. But then again, you cannot be at that day 1, so you need to move that level 1, level 2, level 3 to level 4. So when I'm talking all these things, all of you who are listening this, you may want to reflect back at your organization, look at back at what you are doing today and what level you are. And then you can take it. I'm sure that this presentation will be shared, and then you can use it and things like that. Process-wise, coming to that, definition of a simple BCDR practice for your critical components, and then approval of reviewing any versions. And I don't want to get into each and every detail here. Moving on from the culture, another most important, when we talk about DevOps, the most important is primarily build and deployment, right? That's the most of the time what you do is the build and deployment. So when we talk about this particular phase of build and deploy, what are the various levels and how you go about it? Within the build, if you look at it, you have a defined build process. If you have a defined build process, you are okay. What are you going to do with it? Are you doing okay with it? Are you really practicing it? That's a different question. But you have a defined build process, so you are at level 1. When you conduct regular, then you go on to conduct regular tests. And then you're signing off artifacts and signing off the code and building and testing of artifacts in virtual environments. When you do get into that level of building, which is very, very important, then you come to the deployment. Deployment is defined at level 1. You are defined a development process and inventory of running artifacts. If you have all those things, you are at level 1. Level 2 is the backup before deployment. So you're looking at that. Level 3 is handover of confidential parameters. How are you handling that? So you're getting into a little bit more depth of it. And usage of feature toggles, how you're going about some artifacts for environment. So when you move from level 1 to 2 to 3, then you are already seeing that you are increasing your knowledge and your also knowledge of how you want to handle your deployment. And when you are at level 4, you are not directly putting your application to one server directly. Go big bang, I'm going to go ahead and do it. But it's a blue-green kind of a deployment that you get into. Blue-green, I hope you will know that you have 2 servers identical. You put in the blue and then put in, so basically mirroring of it and things like that. Then you get into patch management. Patch policy is defined. And then you get into a usage of short maximum life for containers. Today, we are all talking about containers, right? So it is very important that how are you managing the patches within the containers. Very, very important, because the life of the container, right? It could be 2 days, 4 days, 30 days, and things like that. So what happens is that if there is any vulnerability that is open in the code in your container, you are actually opening up opening up the code for a lot of vulnerability. So that is something which is important. I think running a little late of time, but I'll try to speed up a little bit. Then info gathering, again, monitoring, which I spoke about earlier. Monitoring is very, very important. Simple application metrics you will gather to a coverage of control, total control of metrics. So first level is a defined metrics that you will have, and level 4 will be not only you will be collecting the metrics, but we'll also feeding the metrics back into the system to see how you can further improve on it. Similarly, logging systems, you have a centralized logging system to move to a correlation of security events. You say that you see an event that is being happening, security incident that happened in one particular place, and then you correlate to point A to point B and see, oh, there is there any correlation. So that you get into that level of analysis when you are at level 4. Moving on, again, infrastructure is an important parameter. Hardening of infrastructure, right from segmentation of network, which I spoke about it. You need to have a segmentation of network, right from development, deployment, your servers for staging and things like that at the basic level. Move on to the limitation of service calls, system calls in virtual environments, or usage of a chaos monkey. Okay, chaos monkey, chaotic monkey. You plug the servers, you unplug your laptop servers and things like that, and then see that how the system is responding to it. If there is any vulnerability, somebody is able to peeking and things like that. So something which is important. Dynamic depth of application, again, you do a simple scan at the level 1. If there is a requirement, one scanner you have and do that. To level 4, where you get into coverage analysis, coverage of services to service communication, you have more, your orchestration of multiple tools into the entire system. Test and verification, quickly, it's again very important. From level 1, 2, 3, 4, first is a test of middleware components with known vulnerabilities, which is very, very important. Today, the biggest advantage is that 90% of the vulnerabilities are already known. I will not put as more than 90%. There could be, so more than 90% of your vulnerabilities already known. So you need to check for the constantly for the known vulnerabilities. That gives you a very good head start. And then you get into the level 4, where you exclusive or source code duplicates, you need to look at it, and stylistic analysis, go into the little bit more depth of how the code is written. If there is an indentation difference within the code, if there is a stylistic guidelines that is given, there could be vulnerabilities that come because of that. Okay, and then test intensity. Default settings for intensity you can do, and you can go on to create, deactivate, and things like that. Consolidation of the entire thing, test and verification, definition of quality case that you can put in place, up to the advanced visualization of defects, and then usage of vulnerability management system. So you have a system where you will manage the vulnerabilities, and you also know the history of these vulnerabilities that is happening, so that you have a control of all these things. Application tests, there's nothing at the level 1, but then level 2 you do a security unit test, which is important, and then you go to a level 4 high coverage of security, and then you also do conduct smoke tests and things like that. And then the dynamic depth for infrastructure, right from the test network segmentation and to a load test. So many people are at the same time as the system crashing, and there's vulnerabilities that can be attributed towards that. And then how are you going about the stored secrets in your static depth for infrastructure, that perspective. And then you go to that extent of test of infrastructure component for known vulnerabilities. So building that at level 4. So having said that, what you call a stage-wise approach, you have a level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4. This is something which is advocated by DevOps Foundation, so you can get this model there. And where I really I like the model, because you don't need to go for a big bang approach with respect to security. It does not work. It may actually trigger back to you. So as far as DevOps is concerned, let me look at it. So these are the essentially things that you will do, right? You have a planning and design, you have a code, you have a build and test, you have a release, then you have a deploy, and then you operate. Okay. Now, what essentially happens in DevOps, right? These things, right? These things happen multiple times. Okay. In iterations, this may not happen as iterative as we may want, because it's not included. We may not want to do it many times, but then this is the model. So each one of these stages are extremely important. So how, from the security point of view, what is that you want to do in each one of these phases? So plan and design is something where you want to do a threat model. You cannot build a threat model once you get into a DevOps and you say that you are building and things like that. It's like, going back and changing my architecture. You cannot do that. You cannot build a house for you, and you build the house halfway and then you're thinking about putting a security system in place. No, you need to think about the security in the beginning. And then you need to also do the risk profile and what kind of a security metrics you want to collect, which is makes more sense for you. And then at the code level, the source code review and static analysis you want to do as far as the security is concerned in code thing. Build and test. When you do that, you do the security integration test, and you do the full-blown VAPT test. That is what you would want to do at the build and test. Release phase is basically you want to get into the network analysis and things, because you are releasing it is just out of your build and test area. Development gets into release, so getting into the configuration, how secured it is, and things like that. Once you do that, you deploy it. Deployment, again, vulnerability, you need to look at that and see that how you can remediate some of those, and you need to conduct what you call the security smoke test continuously. All these things can be automated, which I will talk in the next slide. And then comes finally the operation, the continuous monitoring and alerts and audits and threat intelligence. So this is something which goes on and on every time. Once you do and deploy and deliver, it is not that it is done and dusted, because the patches keep happening. You may be integrated several tools into your solution. Some of the tools might have gone new upgrades and new patches would have come in. So how are you going to look at it and things like that? So this is where you need to, at the operation level, you have to continuously look at it. Quickly, tools for DevOps at the planning and design. I mentioned the OWASP tool, and then this Microsoft Threat Model TMT tool that you can use. At the coding stage, you can use AppScan, which does the things very beautiful, commercial tool, but then you can use a lot of open source tools are there. SonarQube, again, another most important popular coding tool. So these are the tools which you can ingest into your code when you are developing the code. So at the code level, when you're developing, if there are any static vulnerabilities, this can actually bring that out. Build and test, which will be a continuous thing where you can use again burp suite and things like that. There are again various tools there which you can do it. Release, again, there are tools. Deployment, Splunk again stands out, probably the most common, most popular, most enjoyed by most of the people, and equally IBM Radar. I'm not here to advocate and brand any of these tools here, but then most popular tools are there for the deployment and operation. But one word of caution as when we use these tools in DevOps model for security. What happens when you try to ingest these tools into various this code and build and test and things like that? So what happens is that there are a lot of false positives are will be reported. So instead of speeding up your development, primarily that is the reason why you want to do a DevOps, right? You want to do it much faster, reach your customers faster in your development life cycle and test cycle and things like that. But then due to a lot of these false positives, you may be actually slowing down the system. So it's very, very important that you actually don't go overboard implementing this, and you don't actually, instead of false positive, there may be some false negatives, and you may be just missing on that. That is one word of caution there. Finally, once you have done this, how do you measure your DevSecops success on these lines? Stable governance, you need to have the, as I said, the metrics and things like that. You have a checklist. How do you go about it? And build a self-service and security capability instead of looking at outside support. And then automate, as much automate. And you have to see that how much you want to automate and what are the things that can be automated without much of issues that should be automated. And you have to plan for an end-to-end security implementation, right from the planning stage to the deployment and release stage. And then proactive monitoring, learning curve, and innovation, which is very, very important. And that only will mature your, DevSecOps maturity model. So finally, I like this particular thing mentioned by Ryan. It says that 134 days to fix the vulnerability, but then when using a DevSecOps, it just took 92 days. Okay. Similarly, static analysis, when they was using that, vulnerabilities took about 113 days, whereas DevSecOps companies took about just 51 days. So there are a lot of benefits when you work on this model. So with that, I end this session, and I hope there were takeaways from this, and I look forward to any questions.
Thank you for such an informative session, Mr. Krishnamurthy. We'll move on to the QA sessions. So we have our first question. What are the main challenges / pushbacks you see from access when trying to adopt a DevOps culture?
Okay. See, the thing is that one of the key things, there are several, and that's the reason why culture has always been spoken in all the DevOps conferences by everybody, because DevOps is culture is important. The thing is that who will take the response? There are multiple stakeholders. There is a development stakeholder. There is a testing QA stakeholder. There is an operations stakeholder. So the understanding of how you go about implementing a DevOps model, who is one person responsible, it's very, very difficult. So it is a collaborative effort to really implement a DevOps model. And that is the main challenge as far as the DevOps implementation and culture is concerned, according to me. Okay.
The next question then. Sorry, you can read it out.
So second question I see as does security slow down the DevOps flow? How do we counteract that? I just mentioned this. Security should not actually. That objective is that it should not, because the whole purpose of DevOps is that you are speeding up things and putting security into it. That you are putting security tools to automate the finding the vulnerabilities. So essentially, doing it the right way, it will not slow down. But the word of caution that I mentioned, that you need to continuously look at the log that is churned out by these tools. If there are too many false positives, then you will be spending a lot of time. You'll be going back to the developer saying, hey, look, there are a lot of vulnerabilities that are showing up. And they will be finding and going and finding and saying that, hey, these are not vulnerabilities. You understand what I mean? So you need to look at a model in which you will have a solution for the false positives. It's very important. Otherwise, it will definitely slow down. So you need to have a process in place where you will continuously monitor the logs and look at that. The smart way of looking at your logs and alerting only for the right kind of vulnerabilities. That comes out of experience when you start looking at the logs generated by many of these tools. Okay, DevOps or DevSecops, how it is decided. Okay, so let me put it this way. Ideally, there should be only one DevOps. Ideally, there should be only one DevOps, and security, and you may talk about so many other things have come, infrastructure, so many things today people have started adding to it. Frankly speaking, should we call it as a DevOps or DevSecops? For me, DevOps should be okay, because I feel that security should be anyway part of DevOps. DevSecops is only to bring and highlight the importance of security in a DevOps model. So, so you need to have a DevSecops model. So if you ask me, DevOps model where you have a security or you have a DevSecops, the choice is yours. But security should be part of it. Hope I answered that.
Okay, so we'll wait 2 more minutes for any further questions.
Sure.
I believe we have one. What is the DevSecops org structure in your organization? Who is accountable for whole delivery, dev, testing, ops, security?
Good question. Very good. Whoever has asked that, anonymous, I like this question. Primarily because this is the biggest culture I said, and very good question. As I said, one need to get what you call advocates from delivery, from testing, from operations and security to be part of your DevSecops structure. And you need to have a committee. if there is no one person who can manage and handle it. Okay, that's not possible, because we are talking about a large enterprise, large implementation and things like that. So you need to have a committee. You have a DevSecops committee. You can call it as a DevSecops committee, or you call it as a DevOps committee. You need to have people from each one of these. You need to have from infrastructure. You need to have from the development. You need to have from testing. You need to have from security, and those aspects which are part of your DevOps. And each one of them should be committed from their teams. Like, for example, you have this agile, right? In agile, what you do is that there is a, if you are relating to it, do I have a scrum master? No, I don't have a scrum master kind of thing for DevSecops. Okay, so if I have to relate, because agile is something which is more popular, common, so that's the reason I'm taking that as a comparison. So you come for a Scrum meeting. So the Scrum meeting stakeholders are everybody. Here I'm saying that the stakeholders would be each one from each one of these verticals, and they form the group here to see that the best way it can be implemented. I hope that answered. That's what we do it. Yeah.
Thank you for answering all the questions, Mr. Krishnamurthy. We'll be moving on to our break session for now, and we'll see you at our panel session then.
Sure. Thank you very much. And dear everyone, it was very nice talking to you and interacting with your questions.